Hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel, U.S. Immigration News. We hope you're doing great. Secretary Noem rescinds previous administration's extension of Haiti's temporary protected status. The Trump administration, led by DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, is rolling back Biden-era immigration policies, including rescinding temporary protected status extensions for Haitian and Venezuelan migrants and pausing immigration applications for certain migrants admitted under Biden's parole programs. Secretary Noem vacated a decision by the previous administration to extend Haiti's temporary protect status by 18 months. As part of this move, Haiti's TPS will end on August 3, 2025, unless extended. This is part of President Trump's promise to rescind policies that were magnets for illegal immigration and inconsistent with the law. TPS is a type of immigration status available to nationals of certain designated countries that allows aliens, even if they entered the country illegally, the ability to reside temporarily in the U.S. The Secretary of Homeland Security is authorized to designate a foreign country for TPS if there is an ongoing armed conflict, an environmental disaster, or extraordinary and temporary conditions. For decades, the TPS system has been exploited and abused. For example, Haiti has been designated for TPS since 2010. The data shows each extension of the country's TPS designation allowed more Haitian nationals, even those who entered the U.S. illegally, to qualify for legally protected status. In May 2011, DHS estimated that 57,000 Haitians were eligible to register for TPS. In August 2021, DHS estimated that 155,000 Haitians were eligible under the new designation. And by July 2024, the estimate skyrocketed to 520,694. A statement from a DHS spokeswoman. Biden and Mayorkas attempted to tie the hands of the Trump administration by extending Haiti's temporary protected status by 18 months, far longer than justified or necessary. We are returning integrity to the TPS system, which has been abused and exploited by illegal aliens for decades. President Trump and Secretary Noem are returning TPS to its original status, temporary. Last month, Secretary Noem similarly rescinded the previous administration's Venezuela TPS extension. Trump scales back Biden-era TPS extension for Haitian migrants. U.S. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem announced Thursday that the agency is scaling back a Biden-era extension of temporary protected status for Haitian migrants and that hundreds of thousands could be eligible for deportation in August. President Joe Biden's DHS Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, extended TPS for Haitian migrants until February 2026, but the Trump administration contends he did not sufficiently explain his reasoning. Joseph N. Matsara, acting DHS General Counsel, wrote in a memo that the Trump administration now has until June to decide on whether to issue its extension for Haitian migrants. If no decision is made, TPS will expire for an estimated 520,000 Haitians in the fall, leaving many of them without work permits or shields from deportation. Haiti received temporary protected status designation in 2010 after a powerful earthquake killed thousands of people. The country has faced extreme poverty and political instability that has only worsened in recent years as gang violence has escalated after the 2021 assassination of Haiti's president. In the most recent TPS extension, the Department of Homeland Security under Biden said extending and re-designating Haiti for TPS was warranted because conditions that support Haiti's designation are ongoing and that doing so was not contrary to the national interest of the United States. Biden and Mayorkas attempted to tie the hands of the Trump administration by extending Haiti's temporary protected status by 18 months, far longer than justified or necessary, DHS spokesperson Tricia McLaughlin said in a statement. We are returning integrity to the TPS system, which has been abused and exploited by illegal aliens for decades. The move marks another escalation of the Trump administration's efforts to revoke the special status that has been granted to scores of migrants fleeing crises in their homelands. It is not the first time Trump has sought to cut the temporary humanitarian protections for Haitians. In 2017, he sought to end the temporary status for Haitians. He was ultimately blocked from revoking the status of recipients hailing from Haiti, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Sudan. The latest decision on TPS for Haitians is expected to be challenged in court. DHS recently rescinded TPS for hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan migrants. This week, Venezuelan migrants and civil rights organizations filed 2 lawsuits. The suits were filed in response to Noem's decision to rescind the temporary protected status for Venezuelans shortly after she was confirmed. Mayorkas had extended protections for as many as 600,000 Venezuelans through October 2026. The Biden administration cited Venezuela's extreme poverty and economic and political crises under Nicolas Maduro's autocratic rule in extending the protection. But the Trump administration moved quickly to reverse that decision, making some eligible for deportation as soon as April. The first suit, filed in the U.S. District Court in the Northern District of California, argues that NOEM and the Department of Homeland Security have no legal authority to undo a TPS extension once it has been made, and that the administration's actions are motivated by racism, in violation of the Fifth Amendment, which guarantees due process. That is based on a mountain of racist statements made by both her and President Trump against Venezuelan refugees going back now for several years, calling them animals, calling them dirtbags, falsely claiming that they are people who are let out of prisons and let out of mental institutions, and just broad, completely false statements that just restate racist tropes, said Haitian Anthem, one of the lawyers on the case and co-director of the Center for Immigration Law and Policy at the UCLA School of Law. CASA, a national immigrant advocacy group, and Make the Road New York, a community organization, filed a separate lawsuit Thursday in U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland. DHS's recent actions ignore the statutory scheme that Congress enacted and instead threaten to force lawfully admitted and TPS-eligible Venezuelans and their families to return to a country experiencing one of the worst humanitarian disasters in the Western Hemisphere, CASA and Make the Road New York's lawsuit reads. On the campaign trail, Trump spoke frequently against Venezuelans, talking about an invasion and mentioning Tren de Aragua gang members as if they were everywhere. He also frequently berated Haitian immigrants and regurgitated a debunked rumor that they were eating dogs and cats. In Trump's first month back in the White House, he and administration officials have focused heavily on Venezuelan migrants. The Trump administration recently designated Tren de Aragua, a terrorist organization, and sent 177 Venezuelan migrants to a detention facility at the Guantanamo Bay Naval Station in Cuba. NOEM described them as the worst of the worst. Through interviews with relatives of some of the migrants and an analysis of records cast doubt on those claims, Haitian Anthem pointed out one specific instance of NOEM using racist language on television when talking about the end of TPS for Venezuelans. Days before she officially issued the termination notice, NOEM went on Fox and Friends and said she was ending the 18-month extension Biden implemented days before leaving the White House. "The people of this country want these dirtbags out," NOEM said on the show. NOEM has emphasized in multiple television interviews and on social media that the administration is focused on deporting criminal gang members. Criminals are not eligible for protection under TPS. Haitian Anthem, who led the lawsuit that blocked Trump from terminating protections for Haitians and other groups during his first term, said NOEM's move to rescind TPS for Venezuelans after Mayorkas's extension is the first time in the 35-year history of the Temporary Protected Status statute that an administration has ever taken back an extension early. Haitian Anthem said the ultimate goal is for a judge to restore the extension. But in the immediate term, he said, the lawyers on the first case will ask that the court postpone the effective date so that it is no longer hanging over everybody's head. Venezuelans are by far the largest group protected from deportation under a 1990 law that authorizes the government to award undocumented immigrants TPS if their countries are experiencing war, disaster, or another crisis. The Biden administration had granted them TPS in 2021 and 2023. The 2023 group's protections are set to expire in April, while the 2021 group's status will expire in September. Venezuelan TPS recipients have expressed fear and concern over the possibility of having to return to their home country as the Maduro regime, which Trump has previously railed against, remains in power. In the termination notice, NOEM argued that Venezuelans no longer needed protection, in part because there had been notable improvements in several areas such as the economy, public health, and crime. The lawsuit brought by the National TPS Alliance and individual Venezuelan TPS recipients notes that Venezuelans cannot return home safely. If Secretary NOEM's TPS termination goes into effect, they will be subject to deportation yet unable to return safely to their home country, and without legal authorization to live or work in the United States, the lawsuit reads. Cecilia Gonzalez Herrera, one of the plaintiffs in the case, came to the United States with her parents in 2017. They applied for asylum after fleeing political persecution in Venezuela, and 8 years later, their case is still pending. In 2021, they applied for temporary status when Biden first designated Venezuelans for the protections. Gonzalez Herrera, 25, said it's heartbreaking to see how the Trump administration is referring to thousands of Venezuelans living in the United States as criminals and associating them with Venezuela's feared Tren de Aragua gang. "The reality is that families like mine came to this country looking for a safer future," said González Herrera, a voting rights advocacy coordinator for a national civil rights organization. "We're hardworking people. The only crime we committed was aiming for a better life." González Herrera said she decided to serve as a plaintiff in the lawsuit because her parents raised her to fight for democratic principles. "When in hard situations, you are faced with two choices, either fleeing or fighting. And I already fled a country once," she said. "I'm not willing to do it again, so I'm choosing to fight." U.S. pauses immigration applications for certain migrants welcomed under Biden. The Trump administration has enacted a pause on all immigration applications filed by migrants from Latin America and Ukraine allowed into the U.S. under certain Biden-era programs, citing fraud and security concerns, according to two U.S. officials and an internal memo obtained by CBS News. The application freeze will remain in place indefinitely while government officials work to identify potential cases of fraud and enhance vetting procedures to mitigate concerns related to national security and public safety, according to the directive. The move, which had not been previously reported, threatens to cast a cloud of uncertainty over many migrants who were in the process of applying for various immigration benefits that would allow them to stay in the U.S. legally and, in some cases, permanently. While the exact number of affected migrants is unclear, the hold on applications applies to several Biden administration programs that allowed hundreds of thousands of foreigners to come to the U.S. legally through an immigration law known as parole. That law empowers the U.S. government to welcome foreigners quickly on humanitarian or public benefit grounds. The Biden administration used parole at an unprecedented scale, partially to encourage migrants to sign up for legal migration channels instead of crossing the southern border unlawfully. The Trump administration moved swiftly to suspend those efforts, arguing that they abused the parole authority. The Trump administration had previously halted new entries under Biden-era parole policies. But in a memo dated February 14, Andrew Davidson, a top U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services official, ordered an agency-wide administrative pause on all pending benefit requests filed by migrants already allowed into the U.S. under three Biden administration programs. They include a policy called Uniting for Ukraine, set up to offer a haven to those fleeing the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Roughly 240,000 Ukrainians with American sponsors arrived in the U.S. under that process before President Trump took office. Another affected program, known as CHNV, allowed 530,000 Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans sponsored by American citizens to enter the U.S. The third impacted program consists of processes that permitted some Colombians, Ecuadorians, Central Americans, Haitians, and Cubans with American relatives to come to the U.S. to wait for a family-based green card to become available. Because those allowed into the U.S. under these programs were only given temporary work permits and deportation protections that typically last for 2 years, many of them applied for other immigration benefits, lawyers and an expert said. Those benefits include a program known as Temporary Protected Status for migrants from crisis-stricken countries like Haiti, Ukraine, and Venezuela, asylum, which allows those fleeing persecution to gain a permanent haven in the U.S., and green cards or permanent American residency. Because of a Cold War-era law, Cubans paroled into the U.S. are eligible to apply for green cards. However, under the internal USCIS directive, officials will no longer be able to process any applications for these programs or any other benefit if the requests were filed by migrants who arrived in the U.S. under the targeted Biden administration policies. This effectively freezes their ability to move into another legal status, said Lyndon Melmed, who served as the top lawyer at USCIS during the administration of former President George W. Bush and now works as a partner at Barry Appelman and Leiden LLP. In the interim, they would remain susceptible to removal from the country if the government terminates their parole status. The USCIS memo said the move is justified because, currently, fraud information and public safety or national security concerns are not being properly flagged in USCIS adjudicative systems. The directive cites the Biden administration's move last year to temporarily pause the parole initiative for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans due to fraud concerns. In his memo, Davidson referenced investigations that he said found thousands of CHNV applications with serial sponsors, information of deceased individuals or identical addresses. He said some of those cases were proven to be fraud. Davidson also said some migrants allowed into the U.S. under CHNV were not fully vetted. The pause, Davidson said in his memo, could potentially be lifted, but only once officials complete a comprehensive review and evaluation of the in-country population of aliens who are or were paroled into the United States under these categorical parole programs. In a statement Wednesday, the Department of Homeland Security confirmed CBS News reporting, saying the administrative hold on applications would be in effect, pending the completion of additional vetting to identify any fraud, public safety, or national security concerns. The Trump administration has targeted those who've come to the U.S. under the Biden-era immigration parole programs in other ways, too. Last month, officials authorized federal immigration agents to seek the deportation, including in an expedited fashion in some cases of those permitted to enter the U.S. under the CHNV program and other Biden administration parole policies. The administration has also drafted plans to revoke the parole status of many of those who've come to the U.S. under CHNV. With legal challenges mounting against these policy reversals, the future of TPS recipients and migrants under Biden-era programs remains uncertain. While the administration argues these measures restore integrity to the immigration system, critics contend they undermine due process and put vulnerable populations at risk. That is all for today, in this video. What are your thoughts on this? Please let us know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching the entire video. Hopefully, the information is useful to you. See you later in the next video. Till then, take care.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel US Immigration News. We hope you are doing great. Secretary Noem resigns previous administration extension of Haiti temporary protected status. The Trump administration led by DHS Secretary Kristi Noem has resigned a Biden-era extension of temporary protected status for Haitian and Venezuelan migrants. Haiti TPS designation in place since 2010 after a devastating earthquake will end on August 3rd, 2025 unless extended. Officials argue that TPS has been exploited, noting that Haitian TPS recipients grew from 57,000 in 2011 to over 520,000 by 2024. The administration claims Biden's 18 months extension was unjustified and inconsistent with TPS' intent temporary nature. Similarly, reverse Venezuela's TPS extension initially set to last until October 2026, making some Venezuelans eligible for deportation as soon as April. Critics have filed a lawsuit arguing that Noem lacks the authority to resign TPS extension and that the decision is racially motivated. Advocates state that Venezuela remains unsafe due to economic collapse and authoritarian rule, while Noem insists deportation efforts will focus on criminal elements. Additionally, the Trump administration has enacted a pause on immigration applications for migrants from Latin America and Ukraine who were allowed entry under Biden-era parole programs. Citing fraud and security concerns, this identified freeze affects those in the programs like Uniting for Ukraine, which allowed 40,000 Ukrainians to enter the US, and CHNV, which admitted 530,000 Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans with the US sponsors. Migrants under this program only receive temporary work permits and deportation protection, leading many to apply for asylum, green card, or TPS. The freeze halts all pending applications, leaving them unable to transition to permanent legal status. DHS justifies the decision by citing fraudulent applications, including cases involving deceased sponsors and duplicate addresses. Critics argue the move disproportionality harms vulnerable migrants, while the administration maintains it is necessary to restore integrity to the immigration system. Further, the administration has authorized federal immigration agents to seek deportation of migrants admitted under Biden-era parole programs, including expedited removal in some cases. There are also plans to revoke the parole status of many CHNV migrants. This video marks a significant rollback of Biden immigration policies, emphasizing enforcement and restrictions. Critics argue these measures undermine due process and force migrants into precarious situations, while supporters claim they curb abuse. Legal challenges against these policies are ongoing, with court battles expected in the coming months.